He was called the Brainy Don, a man who didn't need violence to rule the underworld, just his mind. Semion Yudkovich Mogilevich is known as the most powerful mafia boss in Russia, a man whose criminal empire stretched across continents and touched governments, banks, and billionaires. While other mobsters fought with guns, Mogilevich fought with intelligence, building billion-dollar money laundering schemes, manipulating stock markets, and orchestrating global fraud operations that fooled even the FBI. But what makes his story terrifying is how invisible his power was. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was living openly, protected by influence, money, and fear. The FBI called him the most dangerous mobster in the world, yet he lived like a king in Moscow, untouchable and unstoppable. This isn't just the story of a criminal. It's the story of how one man used intelligence, connections, and corruption to control the global underworld. From Kiev to New York, his reach was endless, his power unmatched. This is the chilling rise of Semion Mogilevich, the man the world calls the Brainy Don. The kind of gangster people expected. He didn't grow up with guns or gangs. He grew up with numbers, studying economics and mastering the art of manipulation. What made Mogilevich different was his mind. He realized early on that intelligence could be a far more dangerous weapon than a gun. As the Soviet Union began to collapse, Mogilevich saw opportunity in chaos. He used his education to build a criminal empire that looked completely legitimate from the outside. Through banks, oil companies, art auctions, and fake businesses, he laundered billions of dollars, all while staying several steps ahead of law enforcement. He didn't just control criminals, he controlled businessmen, politicians, and even law enforcers. By the 1990s, Mogilevich had become the undisputed boss of bosses in the Russian Mafia. The FBI, Interpol, and multiple governments hunted him, yet he remained untouchable in Moscow, protected by powerful allies. His empire stretched across Europe and America, fueled by corruption, influence, and strategy. This is not just another story about a mob boss. It's the story of a man who turned intelligence into absolute power. This is the world of Semion Mogilevich, the Brainy Don of the underworld. Semion Yudkovich Mogilevich's story begins in post-war Kyiv, Ukraine, where he was born in 1946 into a working-class Jewish family. From the start, he stood out, not for aggression or toughness, but for his intellect. Teachers described him as a quiet, calculating boy with an exceptional memory and a talent for numbers. After finishing school, he attended Lviv University, earning a degree in economics. Most of his classmates went into regular jobs or government work. Mogilevich, however, had other ambitions. In the 1970s, the Soviet black market was thriving. Everyday goods were scarce, and people paid huge sums for foreign products. Mogilevich saw opportunity in the chaos. Using his economics background, he began trading illegal currency and smuggling art and antiques out of the Soviet Union. These weren't violent crimes. They were smart, strategic, and profitable. His ability to understand money, markets, and human psychology made him stand out even among professional criminals. By his mid-20s, Mogilevich had already been arrested twice for fraud-related offenses. But prison didn't break him. It refined him. Inside, he made connections with seasoned criminals and learned how the underground economy worked. When he was released, he was no longer just a clever smuggler. He was a strategist, ready to play the long game. As the Soviet Union began to weaken in the 1980s, corruption and desperation spread across Eastern Europe. Mogilevich joined forces with the Lyubertskaya Group, one of the most dangerous Russian crime syndicates at the time. While others handled violence and intimidation, Mogilevich became the brains behind the operation, managing finances, hiding profits, and investing dirty money in legitimate businesses. He realized something most gangsters never did. The real power wasn't in controlling territory. It was in controlling money. And money could control everyone, from gangsters to government officials. By the late 1980s, Mogilevich had accumulated immense wealth through currency trading, arms deals, and black market investments. He was already building international connections, establishing companies in Hungary, Israel, and the Czech Republic. His legitimate-looking enterprises became perfect covers for laundering millions in illegal profits. He also started gaining influence among the Russian émigré community. Many Jewish families fleeing the Soviet Union were desperate to sell their valuables before leaving. Mogilevich offered to help them sell their possessions, but instead, he kept much of the money for himself. It was one of his earliest and most profitable scams, earning him millions while keeping him out of prison. What made him even more dangerous was his patience. Unlike most mobsters who sought instant fame or dominance, Mogilevich preferred to move silently. He built networks, collected information, and slowly expanded his influence across Europe. Every move was calculated, every connection useful. He wasn't a fighter. He was an architect, designing a system that would one day make him one of the most powerful criminal masterminds on Earth. By the time the Soviet Union finally collapsed in 1991, Mogilevich was ready. Where others saw economic disaster, he saw opportunity, a chance to step into the void and take control of what was left behind. Factories, oil companies, and banks were being sold for pennies, and Mogilevich had the capital, the contacts, and the cunning to take them. The boy from Kiev, who once traded stolen goods, had transformed into a financial genius of the underworld, ready to build a billion-dollar empire that would soon shake the world. When the Soviet Union finally collapsed in 1991, Russia and its neighboring states fell into chaos. The economy was in ruins, government control had weakened, and a new era of privatization began. State-owned industries, oil, gas, metals, and transportation, were suddenly up for grabs. While most citizens struggled to survive, a few sharp minds saw an opportunity to get rich beyond imagination. Among them was Semion Mogilevich, who was already waiting for this moment. Mogilevich understood something that few others did. The fall of the Soviet Union wasn't just a political event. It was a financial gold mine. Using the money he had earned from art smuggling and underground trading, he began buying up shares of privatized companies. He didn't buy them under his own name, of course. Instead, he created a network of shell corporations, fake companies registered in countries like Hungary, Cyprus, and the United Kingdom. Through these businesses, he quietly took control of valuable resources while remaining invisible on paper. His empire grew rapidly. He invested in oil and gas pipelines, metal industries, and real estate. But the true brilliance of Mogilevich's operation was how he laundered money. Billions of dollars from criminal activities, arms trafficking, drug sales, and fraud, were funneled through legitimate businesses. To the outside world, it looked like success. In reality, it was one of the largest money laundering operations in history. One of Mogilevich's most infamous schemes was through a company called YBM Magnex International, headquartered in Pennsylvania, USA. On the surface, it was a legitimate company that manufactured industrial magnets. In truth, it was a front, a carefully constructed facade for moving dirty money into Western markets. With forged documents, fake financial reports, and bribed auditors, YBM Magnex's stock reached the NASDAQ, America's most trusted exchange. Investors poured millions into it, completely unaware that they were financing the Russian Mafia. When the FBI finally uncovered the fraud, it was too late. Over $150 million had vanished, and Mogilevich was already gone, safely back in Russia, untouchable. The U.S. authorities called it one of the most sophisticated criminal scams ever seen. What shocked investigators the most wasn't the crime itself. It was the fact that Mogilevich had managed to deceive the entire American financial system with a smile. But YBM Magnex was just one piece of a massive puzzle. Mogilevich's empire extended across more than 27 countries. He had banking operations in Europe, front companies in Israel, and real estate investments across Eastern Europe. He also controlled black market routes for arms smuggling, prostitution, and narcotics. often working through trusted intermediaries, so his name never appeared in records. Every transaction, every partnership was part of a larger strategy, to build a criminal empire disguised as a legitimate global corporation. And it worked. By the mid-1990s, Semion Mogilevich was no longer just another mobster. He was a billionaire, moving freely through London, Budapest, and Moscow, attending business conferences as if he were an international entrepreneur. The press began calling him the godfather of the Russian Mafia. Intelligence agencies called him the Brainy Don. And behind every name was one undeniable truth. He was too smart for the system that was supposed to stop him. His influence now extended beyond crime. It reached into politics, energy markets, and intelligence circles. He wasn't just running a criminal network. He was running an empire. The world had never seen a gangster like this before. And for the FBI, this marked the beginning of a new kind of war. A war not against guns and drugs, but against intelligence and deception. By the late 1990s, Semion Mogilevich had become a name whispered in every major intelligence agency on Earth. His empire stretched across continents. His companies operated under layers of false ownership, and his fortune was measured in billions. But no matter how deep he hid behind his network of businesses, the truth was beginning to surface, and law enforcement was finally catching on. The FBI, Interpol, and Europol began sharing intelligence, connecting the dots between global crimes that all pointed back to one man. From fraudulent energy deals in Eastern Europe to stock manipulation in America, the same fingerprints appeared, those of the Brainy Don. What shocked investigators most was how Mogilevich managed to operate like a corporate executive, all while running what the FBI called one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in the world. The FBI officially placed Mogilevich on its 10 most wanted fugitives list in 2003. His charges included securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering, but agents believed those were only a fraction of his real crimes. They suspected he was also involved in weapons trafficking, prostitution rings, and even deals with corrupt politicians and intelligence agencies. The Bureau estimated his network spanned over 27 countries, generating billions every year. But there was one problem. They couldn't touch him. When the IBM Magnex scandal broke in the US, Mogilevich didn't wait around. He fled back to Russia, where he was welcomed like royalty. In Russia, his power came not from guns, but from protection, the kind that only political connections could buy. According to intelligence reports, Mogilevich had close ties with powerful businessmen and officials in the Russian government. He provided financial expertise, political donations, and in return, received what every criminal dreams of: immunity. The FBI issued international warrants and pushed Interpol to act, but every attempt to arrest him failed. Whenever agents closed in, Mogilevich was mysteriously warned ahead of time. It was clear someone high up was protecting him. He wasn't hiding in secret mansions or remote islands. He was living openly in Moscow, attending elite parties, and running business meetings in luxury restaurants. In one rare television interview, he even laughed off the allegations, saying he was just a simple businessman. His confidence wasn't arrogance. It was proof that he knew he was untouchable. The FBI was furious. They called him the most dangerous mobster in the world, not because of his violence, but because of his intelligence and influence. Traditional gangsters could be killed or arrested. Mogilevich operated in a realm beyond law, one that mixed finance, politics, and crime so seamlessly that even when exposed, he couldn't be prosecuted. Despite the FBI's relentless pursuit, Russia refused to extradite him, claiming that he hadn't broken any laws under Russian jurisdiction. It was a legal wall the Bureau couldn't break. Even Interpol's red notice, the international order for arrest, was meaningless as long as Mogilevich stayed within Russia's borders. For the world's law enforcement agencies, Semion Mogilevich became a symbol of absolute criminal immunity. He was the ghost they could see but never touch. His name appeared in intelligence briefings, United Nations reports, and criminal databases, but his status remained the same: free, powerful, and protected. While the FBI hunted him from afar, Mogilevich continued to expand his empire quietly, investing in real estate, private banks, and energy projects. His face appeared on wanted posters across the US, but in Moscow he lived like a businessman, proof that intelligence, not violence, truly ruled the underworld. Semion Mogilevich's greatest weapon was never his money. It was his influence. While most mob bosses fought for street power, Mogilevich aimed higher. He wanted to control the people who controlled the streets, the politicians, bankers, and businessmen who shaped nations. By the early 2000s, he had transformed from a criminal mastermind into something far more dangerous: a power broker behind the scenes of global politics and finance. Mogilevich understood the art of leverage. He knew that money was only valuable when it could buy silence, loyalty, or access. Through years of careful networking, he built deep connections with Russian oligarchs who had risen during the chaotic privatization years. Many of these billionaires had dirty money that needed to be cleaned, and Mogilevich was the man who could do it. In return, they opened doors for him, to government contracts, financial institutions, and even policy influence. His reach extended beyond Russia. In Eastern Europe, his companies had stakes in energy, arms, and shipping. In Western Europe, he used bankers and lawyers to move illicit funds into offshore accounts and legitimate enterprises. Intelligence agencies across the continent believed he had access to senior officials who protected his business interests. Reports even suggested that he provided financial strategy consultations to state-linked corporations, a shocking revelation that blurred the line between government and organized crime. Behind the scenes, Mogilevich acted as a silent partner to numerous criminal and political figures. He rarely appeared in person, preferring to send representatives or use coded communications. His methods were methodical, always layered, always calculated. If an associate was caught, the trail never led back to him. Every shell company, every offshore account, and every middleman was another layer of protection in an invisible web of influence. By this time, even law enforcement realized they weren't dealing with a typical criminal. Mogilevich wasn't trying to dominate through fear. He was becoming part of the system itself. His empire was intertwined with legitimate economies and state institutions. Arresting him could mean destabilizing financial networks and exposing political corruption on an international scale, a risk few governments were willing to take. He was also rumored to have connections to former KGB and FSB officials, which only added to his aura of invincibility. In Russia, many powerful figures benefited from his operations, directly or indirectly. As long as he remained useful, he was protected. His knowledge of global money movements and offshore banking made him invaluable. Some investigators even speculated that he held information that could expose corruption at the highest levels, effectively making him too dangerous to eliminate. What made Mogilevich unique was his transformation. He had evolved from a street-level fraudster into a corporate-level kingmaker, a man who could influence economies and decisions without ever stepping into a boardroom. His operations were no longer about smuggling or theft. They were about control. Through strategic investments, donations, and alliances, he positioned himself where no bullet could reach him. He didn't need an army. His power came from knowledge and access. He was the whisper behind major deals, the unseen hand behind financial decisions, and the ghost that governments pretended didn't exist. By the mid-2000s, Semion Mogilevich was no longer just a mob boss. He was an institution, a shadow government of influence that operated between legality and crime. His genius lay in the fact that while the world called him a gangster, those who truly understood his reach knew the truth. He wasn't under the system. He was part of it. By the late 2000s, Semion Mogilevich's name had become a legend, a mix of fear, mystery, and grudging respect among criminals and law enforcement alike. He was the invisible empire builder, the man who made billions without firing a bullet. The FBI had labeled him one of the most dangerous men on the planet. Interpol had issued notices, and countless journalists had tried to uncover his secrets. Yet despite decades of investigations, arrests, and global pressure, Mogilevich remained free, a living symbol of how intelligence and influence could outmatch justice itself. In 2008, Russian authorities finally made a move. Mogilevich was arrested in Moscow, accused of tax evasion linked to a small company, a trivial charge compared to his actual crimes. The world watched closely, thinking this might be the end of the Brainy Don. But just as easily as he was taken in, he was released months later. Russian officials claimed there was no evidence to continue holding him. The message was clear: Mogilevich wasn't a prisoner, he was protected. After that, he vanished from public view. No flashy appearances, no interviews, no headlines. Some believed he had retired, living quietly under government watch in Moscow. Others claimed he still pulled strings behind the scenes, advising oligarchs and laundering money through offshore investments. But what everyone agreed on was that no one ever truly leaves a throne like his. His empire might have become invisible, but its roots still ran deep through Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The FBI still keeps his name on its most wanted list, describing him as a threat to global financial systems. Yet, after so many years, the Bureau's tone has shifted, from chasing a criminal to acknowledging a reality they cannot change. As long as Mogilevich remains within Russia's borders, no law in the world can reach him. He became the embodiment of a system built on corruption, power, and untouchable privilege. Even those closest to him rarely speak. Associates who once flaunted their wealth now live quietly or have disappeared entirely. Some were killed in mysterious circumstances. Others went into hiding. But Mogilevich, he simply endured, untouched, unbothered, and perhaps even amused by the chaos around him. His story has become a warning to the world, a reminder that crime doesn't always wear a mask or carry a gun. Sometimes it wears a suit, runs corporations, and understands the loopholes of international law better than the governments trying to stop it. Semion Mogilevich didn't just evade justice. He redefined what it meant to be a criminal. To his enemies, he's a ghost who beat the system. To his followers, he's a mastermind who proved that intelligence could build an empire stronger than any mob's muscle. Even today, his legend lives on in documentaries, FBI case files, and whispered conversations among global intelligence circles. No one knows where he truly is or how much of his empire still exists. But the story of Semion the Brainy Don Mogilevich isn't just history. It's a shadow that still moves through the corridors of power. He remains the ultimate symbol of the criminal who became untouchable, a man who didn't just rule the underworld, but became part of the world itself.